alternative experience.
The alternative experience.
The alternative experience.
Hey everybody, welcome to Alternative Experience. Thanks for tuning in. So everywhere you look these days, someone is pushing some kind of new health hack. You know, there's biohackers everywhere. We're climbing out of the floorboards. We're like termites. You know, ice baths, red light therapy, endless kind of supplement recommendations out there, normally sponsoring their shows. But one of the biggest that's kind of stuck around for millennia is fasting. Now, some people swear it's the ultimate tool for health and longevity, while others claim that it completely wrecks your gut, spikes your stress hormones, pumps you full of cortisol, and it's basically what they call self-inflicted torture. So which is it? A powerful, evolutionary-based tool or a modern-day myth? And that's what today's podcast is going to try and clear up for you. Without any of the hype, without any of those Instagram influencer spins, I just want to go through the real science, the real biology, and have a look at how our bodies are actually designed to function so you can really understand why it is that fasting possibly can work. So if we look at sort of comfort versus resilience, one of the biggest threats to modern health, in my opinion, and I talk about it a lot, sorry as a Mozzie, is comfort, the comfort zone, whatever it might be. We live in a world where food is always within reach, Uber Eats, Just Eat, depending on where you live, is literally a button away. And we're told that 3 meals a day plus snacks is the gold standard on how we should be eating. However, when you look at us biologically, that's not how we evolved. I mean, imagine our ancestors, they didn't eat on schedules. They kind of went through cycles of feast and of famine. If they were successful in the hunt, it was feast. If it wasn't, then obviously it was a bit more of famine. And their bodies really adapted to thrive during the leaner times. Okay. Without those cycles, we actually lose resilience. And when resilience begins to drop, everything else follows. Your tolerance for hunger, you get hungry, you have those hunger pangs, which you can't avoid. It's your ability to cope with stress. Even emotional resilience, people get hangry. You've heard that saying. But it goes even deeper. Our bodies spend so much time in the cycle of digestion these days that we have lost our innate ability to heal. And that's where fasting comes in. Not as a punishment, not as something to put yourself through and go, I made it through to the other side. Not a kind of macho challenge, you're not really sort of proving anything. But just as a way to reintroduce a little bit of positive stress, the kind that I suppose wakes your system back up. So I'm going to go through the various different types of fasting and give you a bit of a background on what they do. So we're going to start obviously with intermittent fasting. When most people hear intermittent fasting, they either don't know what you're talking about or they think of this 16-8 split. You fast for 16 hours and you eat your food within an 8-hour window. But really intermittent fasting is simply delaying or skipping a normal regular meal. So if you normally have breakfast and you pushed it back till 11 o'clock, that's a form of intermittent fasting. If you skip lunch, one day because you're not actually hungry or you've got a business meeting, that's the same thing. That's a form of intermittent fasting. You're just pushing your normal feeding schedule back. So your body obviously has to adjust. Now, it does feel a little bit strange at first, but if your body's used to constant food, obviously it's going to throw out those hunger signals, those pangs, like clockwork. If you normally eat something at 11 o'clock, 11sies, obviously your body's going to say, where's this 11 o'clock meal? You know what it's like. But much of that hunger is actually habit. It's not actually a true need. It's not like your body and your system is craving food, unless obviously you're not eating nutritionally high food anyway. But the good news is with a gradual approach, pushing your meals back by 30 to 60 minutes at a time, you'll slowly retrain both your body and your brain. And within weeks, it will start to feel natural. And that's when the benefits begin to stack up. So weight loss for some, steadier energy for others. It might be a better appetite regulation, you're not going to the fridge every 5 minutes. And it's a gentle entry point into fasting without going too extreme. Now, let me talk to you about something that's super important. This is the main thing I think that people need to know about fasting of all types, is something called autophagy. And that is basically our cellular cleanup. When I speak to anybody about fasting, this is what we want to be reaching at some point for at least a period of time. And that word literally means self-eating. Okay, the original word came from a Latin word of self-eating. And no, it's not as scary as it sounds. I mean, your body is eating itself, but it's not as bad as it sounds. So here's the picture. When you go, they say 17 hours, which is the average. Obviously, everybody's different. Everyone has different glucogenic sort of levels, etc. But when you go for an average of 17 hours without food, your body's insulin drops. And instead of digesting food, your cells actually switch into what we call house cleaning mode. So they break down old damaged parts of themselves, mitochondria that aren't working, pathogens, anything that's built up that shouldn't be there. So misfolded proteins, bits of viral debris, and then they recycle them and actually reuse them. It's like sending in, when I sort of explain it to people, it's like sending in a road crew to fix potholes or clear away the wreckage of an accident before it causes traffic jams. So imagine they're going in, they're doing a little bit of house cleaning, a bit of recce. Now, the result that comes from this is healthier, more efficient cells, because you're taking away the bad cells, etc. So it takes away the stress and strain. You're going to have lower inflammation, better protection against things like diabetes, neurodegeneration. And you're even going to affect positively some cancers. In fact, this process was so groundbreaking that in 2016, the Nobel Prize in Medicine went to Dr. Yoshinori Osumi for uncovering exactly how autophagy works. And here's a real cool twist. Some studies suggest that viruses cannot replicate inside a cell when it's in a state of autophagy. And that makes a lot of sense. Fuel's scarce, so the virus has nothing to hijack or to feed itself on. And that's the reason that fasting is being looked at for immune resilience too. It's very important to note that while 17 hours is often the time biohackers will point to as the magic hour, there is a lot of nuance to consider. Autophagy isn't like a light switch. You don't hit a sort of 17th hour and then it goes, switch this dimmer on and then it switch over. It does depend on your glycogen, so it runs on your glycogen, and it's when that gets down to a really low level that will actually switch over to autophagy, and that'll be different in every person. But 17 hours is a good place if you're going to be doing it regularly, because over time you will find that by then your food stores and energy stores are empty and it does switch over. Okay, so that's the 17-hour plus mark. But what if you go for longer? Let me give you a quick summary. 24 hours, obviously that autophagy ramps up because you're in it for longer. So you also get a burst of gut stem cells that will help to repair the lining of your intestines, potentially even into the colon. Plus your brain releases something called BDNF. It's brain-derived neurotropic factor. Easiest way to explain it, it's brain fertilizer, and that supports your memory. It supports things like learning. So it's very, very important. 36 hours, your body flips the metabolic switch, and instead of burning glucose, you're now running on ketones that have been sort of left over from fat. And this makes your energy system way more efficient. You also will start to see your inflammation dropping across the board, across the entire body. 48 hours, now we're talking major mitochondrial upgrades. So not only do you create new mitochondria, which is the energy for your cells, you repair the damaged ones too. So energy, metabolism, resilience, they all get this massive boost. 72 hours, this is the deep reset. So initial research kind of suggests that the immune system actually rebuilds itself at this stage. So it starts to really fortify the sort of ramparts, if you could call it. Now, people with autoimmune conditions sometimes report big improvements at around about this stage. So while much of the official research has either been animal models or small-scale human trials, there really is a growing library of independent research which is showing enormous promise. And obviously you can see everybody's talking about it. So this is something that people are sort of dedicating a lot of time and research efforts onto. So one such person, Dr. Alan Goldheimer, Hamer, I don't know. But he's one of the world's top experts on fasting. And he's actually the founder of a place called True North Healthcare Centre. And what they've done is they've helped over 25,000 people to reverse chronic illnesses, specifically through medically supervised water-only fasting. So he's a proponent for fasting in general. But what they do in their clinic is they do completely supervised medical trials, and they're long-term. So many of his case studies, they've actually been submitted as official peer-reviewed case studies, and they've been printed in multiple medical science journals. Now, these longer fasts are not for everybody, and they do take a lot of preparation, a lot of considerations. You really do need to know what you're doing. But even knowing what's possible shows you just how adaptable the human body really is. This is where most people on the biohacking stop. Okay, but there are nuances and potential pitfalls to take into consideration. Now, here's where we've got to be real. Fasting alone isn't a magic bullet. And as I say, there is nuances on an individual basis to take into consideration. One of the most important things you need to do is you need to understand that how you break your fast is super, super important, as does how you eat on a day-to-day basis after your fast. So if you go 24 hours, 36 hours without food, okay, you reach that autophagy, you do all that good work, and then you smash a pizza, burgers, and a milkshake, doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that you've basically undone all of the benefits and probably made things worse, because what you've done is you've cleared the bacteria in the tummy and then you've just fed negative bacteria back in. So you've literally, it's almost like laying down, I don't know, weeds instead of flowers in your flower bed. So instead, what you want to be doing is you want to think about refeeding yourself gently. I always recommend things like, it depends on what diet you eat, but prebiotic fibers, chicory, the bitters like radicchio, anything that's what we call a bitter. Fermented foods, obviously everyone knows that fermented foods, probiotics are very healthy and gentle on the gut. Start with some fruits, preferably berries, melons, low acidity fruits. Organic and truly free-range eggs, that's my go-to. That and avocados is what I break my fast with. But healthy proteins and fats is then going to be what you would introduce after those sort of, I suppose, those lower stress foods where you're just literally reintroducing stuff. A lot of people will tell you to have fruit juices. Can work, again, depends on how you're eating, how you're actually eating in your day-to-day. But what will happen is this is going to feed your good bacteria. It's going to stabilize your blood sugar levels, and it's going to build on that reset that you've just created over the 24, 36, 48-hour period. The second consideration to take is that fasting isn't the same for men and women. There are a lot of nuances, and I'll give you a couple of ideas here. So men tend to see a sharper metabolic and hormonal benefit. A lot of people that do fasting correct as men will see like a big boost in testosterone, etc. Women, especially pre-menopausal, are more sensitive to calorie restriction. Okay, so too much fasting can obviously disrupt cycles. The hormones are very different to ours. It can even have effects on fertility and menstruation. But post-menopausal women often find that fasting works extremely well. Okay, so again, there's nuances and it's different on an individual basis. Many women that I've spoken to, and you see it anecdotally as well, report a lot of normalization of cycles when they practice fasting alongside what I would call a single ingredient whole foods diet, particularly the carnivore or ketogenic. So of course, if you're pregnant, I would say steer clear of this because you're feeding a baby. You don't want to be fasting yourself. And if you have certain health conditions or you're on certain medications, it may not be safe. So it's always worth checking with your doctor before you actually do it. But the point is, everyone is different. Some are otherwise healthy and may have a lot less considerations. And some people, it's just a little bit of trial and error, sort of finding out what works for you. Other people are obviously chronically ill. And as such, everybody's approach should be measured and gradual until you find out what works. Whatever you do, do it gradually, slowly pushing things back. Okay. Another thing that I want to mention, which a lot of people don't tend to mention on this, is if you're eating this way, obviously what happens if you're not getting enough calories, it will start attacking your muscles and also things like your gums. So you can get things like receding gums. So keep an eye on your gum health. If that starts to even slightly go, you need to up your calorie intake or maybe reduce the window that you're currently fasting for. It's really, really important. If you start getting really skinny, I mean, I did anyway because I don't hold weight on, but I got to a point where I was still happy with how I was. I wasn't getting to a point where I was emaciated. But yeah, really, really keep an eye on that because, again, other people aren't telling you this, but it's something that you do need to be aware of if you're looking to fast regularly or irregularly. Okay, so is fasting myth or miracle? Honestly, it's neither. Okay, it's a really, really powerful and effective tool that you need to have in your toolbox, which used with other things and done correctly, it can be amazing. But it's an ancient tool. You know, we've been doing this for centuries just by default. We had to in our old hunter-gatherer lifestyle because that's how often we got the food. But our bodies have really evolved to use this when food wasn't always guaranteed. And actually, I believe it adds longevity to the end of your life if you do it properly. I think it's also unquestionable that the period of time in which our bodies go through many restorative processes is fasting, and that can only be achieved during this fasted state. So I think it makes sense, even if you're just literally pushing meals back and having a slightly longer fasted window, it's going to benefit you. And in this world of kind of, like I said earlier, we're in a world of constant eating. There's 3 meals a day that we've been programmed to think that we need. But it's very easy to forget that hunger, in the right doses, it's not the enemy. It's a medicine. It really is. It's a medicine. It's resilience. It's resilience training for the body, for the mind. And it's a reset button that most of us have kind of lost touch with and forgotten about. The key really is to find exactly what it is that works for you. That might be skipping breakfast a few times a week. It might be, I don't know, experimenting with a 24-hour fast once in a while, once a month, once a quarter, you know. Or it may just be becoming more comfortable with the feeling of hunger and pushing that meal back a little bit rather than eating at the first sort of sign and panicking at the first pang that you get in your tummy, okay? At the end of the day, fasting isn't about deprivation. It's about remembering what your body's built for and what it's built to do. Repair, reset, and thrive, okay? So I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I covered as much as I can. There is more that you can put into these podcasts, but I don't want to bore people going on for an hour on the same subject. But I hope you get an idea on how effective fasting can be when it's done in the right way. If you have any feedback, any comments, please do leave them. And as always, give us a follow. It really does help us to get the sort of the wider message out to a bigger audience. So anybody that can do that for us, that's great. Rate us on any podcast app that you're on, preferably 5-star, but I'm happy to take constructive feedback. Until the next show, guys, thanks very much for tuning in. The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.